I'm delighted to speak to you today. My name is Manny, and I lead the Aerospace and Satellite Solutions business at Amazon Web Services for Australia and Asia. Australia has a stake in the global space economy, expected to generate a revenue of over $1 trillion by 2040. We are moving from being a consumer of space technologies to being a contributor. Amazon Web Services created an industry business unit dedicated to aerospace and satellite solutions in 2020 because we saw and continue to see incredible potential for cloud computing to support the growing space industry. New companies have moved into the space business and are launching more satellites and human missions into orbit than ever before. We're excited to help companies reimagine how to build, access, and operate space systems on the cloud and use innovation to be successful. We've built a team that has expertise in every facet of the industry, from spacecraft design and launch to on-orbit operations and space exploration. For instance, you may know of AWS Ground Station as a Service, a pay-by-the-minute for antenna access to control satellite communication and process data. AWS Ground Station enables customers to rapidly transform raw data and deliver it to end users when and where they need it. And the elasticity of the cloud means customers can operate at scale to fit their needs. It's only a part of how we've been moving into space in a very big way. Cloud is enabling space industry success. If you watch the Perseverance Mars mission, AWS has been supporting in a number of different ways. All images, for instance, returned from the mission will be hosted on AWS Cloud. And right here in Australia, customer Fireball International is using real-time satellite images, ground cameras, sensors, and powerful artificial intelligence to find bushfires within minutes, dramatically cutting down emergency response times. FarmBot is another Australian agriculture startup. They've developed a range of monitoring devices that enable farmers to remotely check water levels, animals, and staff movements. Space companies and satellite operators are turning to the elasticity, flexibility, and speed of cloud. At Amazon Web Services, we believe space is critically important to so many domains, from national security to scientific research and to economic prosperity. And according to the government strategy, the Australian space sector is expected to generate economic value that grows at an annualized 8.6%, compared to an expected growth in Australian GDP of 2.7% over the next 3 or 4 years. Okay, so where is the innovation opportunity here for you? How can you be a part of the new business models that are emerging from the space economy? Well, I've got a panel of experts to unpack it all for you. Please allow me to welcome to the studio Aude Vignelles. Aude is the Chief Technology Officer at the Australian Space Agency. She has oversight of setting the agency's technology roadmap and delivering against it. She's a space and aeronautics engineer, starting a career at the European Space Agency in the Netherlands. She has over 25 years' experience delivering large and complex programs, introducing new technology in telecommunications, space, and media industries. My second guest today is James Brown. James is the CEO of the Space Industry Association of Australia, Australia's peak body for the space economy, formed to promote the growth of the Australian space sector. By formulating national policies and strategies, the Australian Space Industry Association speaks with authority and credibility on behalf of its members on issues connected with the development of the Australian space industry. James is also a national security and public policy expert. He's previously held research appointments at the Lowy Institute for International Policy, the United States Studies Centre, and the University of Sydney. And last but not least, my friend Dr. Tim Parsons. Tim is a leader for innovative thinking in Australia. He's been a founder, a co-founder, and a C-suite member of 5 startups over the past 12 years, covering the digital media, venture ecosystem, and of course, the space industries. Tim is a startup advisor, an investor, and a member of several industry bodies, including the SmartSat CRC. And he's currently the chair of Aurora, a spin-off of the SmartSat CRC's Australian Space Industry Startup Cluster. Tim holds a PhD in rarefied hypersonic flow simulation from the Imperial College of London. Welcome, everyone. I want to begin by asking you, Ord, why space now, and what's the big opportunity?
Thanks, Manny. Why space? We're using space application every day without even knowing it. I mean, driving here, I use my GPS. That's our data coming from satellites. I want to check the weather when the rain is going to stop. I'm looking at pictures of Australia that are being taken from satellites. I'm taking money out of the ATM. The timestamp is provided by satellite data. And the list goes on and on and on. You said it yourself, $1 trillion of cumulative revenue that is planned for this space application. We need to grab a bit of that. And the Australian Space Agency has very clear goal. We want to triple the size of the industry. So the economy is there, the opportunity is there, and we have to grab it now. If you add to this that there's been a big revolution of technology, we used to build satellites that were like the size of 3 fridges and take up to 10 years to develop and launch. Today you can develop a CubeSat for demonstration and concept in less than 18 months, and it costs $200,000 to launch them. So you have all the ingredients of a recipe for innovation, of a growth of a market. So this is why now, and this is why space.
You mentioned the growth of startups in space. Tim, you're all across the startup scene. Ord mentioned talking about CubeSats and a lot of different launches just in the last few weeks we've had. Our customers, Myriota, Fleet Space, have all been putting out launches. What are you seeing from your perspective?
I think the culture of .com startups has really infiltrated that space sector. The idea that you could build things with component parts, as Ord mentioned, the CubeSats, a lot of them are developed using COTS, commercial off-the-shelf parts. Yeah. And also that idea that you can now test things, fail fast, go again in that same classic internet way. And then the ability to, of course, capture that data, plug it into elastic clouds, spin up instances and deliver a service to customers without huge amounts of physical infrastructure. You know, that all of these things come together to something we call Space 2.0, which is a reinvention of what was very much about big telco, big projects, big satellites, but now increasingly like small, cheap satellites. In a way, you can think of the CubeSat as just like the PC. The PC came along and did away with the mainframe. These small microelectronic satellites are now doing away with these sort of giant, expensive waterfall projects.
I love it. The fact that we're moving from bigger machines to smaller machines, exactly the analogy that you've played out. James, you've got a diverse membership base of space customers and partners. What are your guys saying about what is happening in the transformation of the Australian space sector?
Well, I mean, Australia is such an interesting case. I mean, we had the 4th satellite, I think, in the world was launched from Australia, or the 7th, depending on how you count it. We've got this amazing higher education and research base. Australia is 7 in terms of the number of the most cited papers in space science. Oh, wow. So there's this baseline in Australia that makes it such a great place to develop space technology, services and companies. Before you think about our geography, we're between Europe, we're between the US, we're in the Southern Hemisphere. If you're going to be operating a constellation, it makes sense to have at least some sort of presence or to use some kind of services in Australia. And our industry is booming. I mean, we established our space agency only 2 years ago, but in that time, the membership of our organisation has increased significantly. We're seeing more people returning to Australia to take up jobs in the space industry, Australians and others. And we're seeing the space industry or space technology start to be utilised in non-space industries. So we're starting to get that sort of innovation that happens at the margins of two industries. Yeah. How can we take what we can do from space and apply it in government or in industry to achieve outcomes? And so it's a pretty exciting time to be part of it and seeing what all of the members of Australia's space industry are doing.
Fabulous. And you've got a policy background. And, you know, sometimes we talk about the space industry being new in Australia, but we know that's actually not the case, right? We've got a deep space complex operating out of Canberra, and we've been supporting NASA for, the last 50 years. Tell us a little bit about your involvement with that, James.
Well, I mean, across the road from where I live, there's a telephone exchange. There's a plaque on the wall in Sydney that says that's where the video for the moon landing was fed through. It went into the international cable. It came from a dish just outside of Sydney. So we've been doing that for a long time. We've been helping track, recover satellites. We've been helping on a whole bunch of missions for NASA and others. And we've never really taken advantage of all of this for Australian companies. And the reason we didn't do that was because manufacturing large satellites was beyond our capability. But because of what we've seen in the last 10 to 15 years, because of the decrease in costs, the use of commercial off-the-shelf componentry, all of a sudden Australia is in a position where it can do more and it can lift its ambition.
Okay. So people often think space is rocket launches and satellites. In fact, space technologies underpin many of the daily conveniences that Australians have come to expect. As Ord mentioned, this includes weather forecasting, emergency management, internet access, and even the GPS. Space technology also assists farmers to monitor the health of their crops. Emergency response workers track bushfires and even autonomous mining vehicles. Since we've been doing this for a while in Australia, Ord, what do you think are the advantages, the natural advantages that Australia has in becoming a leader in the space sector?
So this is the exact question the Australian Space Agency asks themselves when we got created. And we could have started playing in every field that applies in space, but we took the time to think our strategy through. And we've published in April 2019 our National Civil Space Strategy, where we highlighted 7 sectors and 7 priority areas where we want to grow our capability. And every time we've chosen a priority, we wondered, is there a need to fulfill? We want to do space to bring a solution to a problem. Is there a market opportunity? Do we have a competitive advantage in Australia? Or do we want to develop this capability for national reasons? We took all these factors into consideration and we came up with these 7 sectors. I'm just going to give 2 examples. The first one is space situational awareness. I'm passionate about that. There was before no satellite orbiting the Earth. If you look at the map of the number of satellites, active satellites, there is less than 3,000, but there are almost 9,000 tons of debris orbiting the Earth. So lots of debris from 10 centimeters to less than 1 millimeter, but even a flake of paint can create a lot of damage to any satellites if it collides. And then you can think of the catastrophic scenario when 2 satellites collide and it's the domino effect, and then you can't use any orbit around the Earth anymore. So we need to make sure that we know where all these space objects are, to make sure that every time we launch a new satellite, we use a space where there is a space, and to make sure that if there is a risk of collision, we can actually predict that and we can maneuver a satellite to avoid the collision. And to do that, you need sensors all over the globe, and you need some sensors in the southern hemisphere. And we have a unique position looking at southern sky. So there is a great opportunity for space situational awareness in Australia, and we are developing some really cool niche sensors technology as well here. Another example is the mining industry, the expertise that we have developed in the last 40 years in remote operation and remote management. Usually when you mine, you have your activities 2,000 kilometers away from where you control the operation. It's far, it's a harsh environment, sometimes it's under the sea. So deploy a lot of expertise in the communication, the lag that you have, the user interface. And we've done that for 40 years. We've done it in an industrial manner and in a very safe manner. So when you think about going to the moon and on Mars and beyond, the chances are we're going to build all the infrastructure required before we send people there, using remote operation, using robots. So there is a fantastic opportunity here, as James was saying earlier, looking at the expertise we have on the ground and export that to space and opening a new business for our expertise. And they're just 2 examples out of the 7 that we're working on.
So that's fantastic. So you mentioned this southern hemisphere, having those skies accessible to us. You mentioned our expertise in mining, which allows us to do a lot of work around remote management, remote operations. Tim, I'm going to ask you this because a lot of innovation is coming into those two domains that Ord's talked about. But I'm finding that a lot of the Australian startups are very creative. I mean, they have use cases that are extending from building new spacesuits to in-orbit drug manufacturing, to like the farmers that we spoke about. What are you seeing that's new and novel for this industry out of Australia?
Sure. I mean, that space suits company is also doing next generation activewear. So there's a great spin out opportunity there. And we're all very familiar with activewear, having been through COVID. We have an incredible range of things. Another piece of information about Australia, we control about 1/6 of the world's surface area from a search and rescue point of view. And in fact, international traffic, airline traffic across the Indian Ocean, Pacific Ocean, and north-south in Asia, we touch about a quarter of the world's air traffic. So there's a startup in Canberra called Skycraft that wants to use space technologies to improve the safety and the traffic management for those use cases. We have people who are taking photographs of other spacecraft to help with space situational awareness, like high Earth orbit robotics. And they're literally identifying very complex orbit conjunctions and helping ahead of time to decide whether there's going to be a problem. We have companies that are using quantum keys, and they're distributing keys from space to help us handle next generation encryption, leveraging research out of places like ANU and Sydney University. And of course, lots of other technologies. We have people in Australia now building radiation tolerant flight computers. There's next generation inertial navigation systems. And we haven't even talked about the amazing biotech opportunities that, going into space has an impact. Apparently, a few days spent in space is incredibly rejuvenating, but maybe 30 days or more, you have to start taking serious drugs. So when it comes to sending people to the moon, to Mars, we have a stake in all of those future opportunities.
A few days in space can be rejuvenating. So I'm hearing beauty treatments in space. James, how do you feel about going into space just so you can look 2.0, the 2.0 version of James?
The only place to get a facial and a mani-pedi would be in space in 20 years' time. But it's a good question. And when I got this job by my 4-year-old daughter, I had to explain to her that I wasn't going to work in space. I was going to be working in the space industry. But she asked me whether I would go up or not. And you've asked me, and I've thought about it a lot. And I think the answer is actually no. I would love to do it, but I think the skills you need, the mindset you need, the commitment you need to strap yourself to a rocket full of, explosive liquid and subject yourself to all the forces that you're going to subject yourself to, the radiation, the isolation, and the skill set you need, that's not me. I know what I am, and that's not me. Yeah. But I'm really happy to support people who want to do that. And I think we'll see more people doing it. I mean, space health and life sciences is a booming industry, because if we're going to be sending people to Mars, if we're going to be sending people to the moon, we're going to need to widen the pool of possible astronaut candidates. The European Space Agency has talked about how do we prepare to send disabled astronauts into space. I think to date, none of the astronauts that have been in space have ever had a broken bone because of the selection criteria. So all of that is going to change. We're going to widen that aperture. That means we're going to be needing to do a lot more sort of modelling, diagnostics, thinking about, the long-term impact of space if you're out there for 6 months, a year, 18 months. And we're going to see this in our lifetime. So, these are real-time problems. These are not academic, esoteric problems.
I love the fact that a lot of life sciences and space medicine is going to generate benefits for humans terrestrially, right here on Earth. So space doesn't just mean innovation for the space sector, but the adjacencies that we're sort of now starting to see, the benefits that are flowing through. Now, there's much more to a career in space, like you said, like your daughter asked, than just being an astronaut or a rocket scientist. Not to take that away from you, Tim. There are many exciting career paths to follow right here on Earth. So there's space law, there's space medicine, there's design and manufacturing, robotics, data analysis, which is what we excel at AWS. So Australia needs a range of skills to support our growing space sector. And the goal of the Australian Space Agency is actually to triple the size of the space sector and create up to 20,000 new Australian jobs by 2030. So, Ord, I want to ask you, what sort of bright spots and or challenges are you seeing in growing the industry as far as the workforce is concerned?
think the bright spot, I like the example that James brought, because space medicine and life science was not a priority at the beginning, and it spun out from our leapfrog area priority, because again in Australia we realized that with the Antarctica division we actually have a lot to say and to bring to sort out the isolation problem, and these guys are cut out of the world for 9 months at a time. So we had to look at that, and again, a lot of things are exportable in space. And what you say resonates for me. Space was always an attraction to me because it's not only space science and space system engineering, rocket science, but it's also covering how are we going to make sure that we can live in space in long term? How are we going to grow food? When you're on the moon, are you going to claim a parcel of the moon and I found water, it's mine? So you need space law, as you regularly said. I can't think of one discipline and background that cannot be applied in space. And as long as you are passionate and curious, that there'll be a career path with that. Having said all that, I think you also need to think that space is hard. It's a hard domain to succeed. Don't be afraid of failure. Don't be afraid of risk. You need to be ready to accept risk and love problem solving. Once you launch something out there, or once you're out there, you're on your own and you can't fix things. So if something goes wrong, you need to try to solve the problems. And I think that takes a kind of a different thinking. And the best example of that is this session on this episode on the Apollo 13 movie. When you have the mission control, that's my favorite part. He comes with a box full of stuff and he put that on a desk and he asked the engineers, you have 2 hours to build an air filter with what's in this box, because there are astronauts up there who don't have any air to breathe. And you need to have an appetite for this. But to your questions, I think, again, Australia has a great opportunity to embrace all these different sectors that we are good at and apply all that into space. And there is not one career that is not applicable to space.
That is fantastic. And it's so encouraging to hear, because every time you say solve a problem, take a risk, try it, it feels like you're talking to our Amazon builders. That's what our builders are renowned for. James, I want to ask you, from a training, upskilling, enablement perspective, what is it that you think we should be doing in Australia? Or what are your members asking for?
Our members want more people. There is such a small pool of talent at the moment. We've got to build that pool. And it's not all going to be people who've been through university engineering programs. There will be a vocational skills component of this as well. And as Ord mentioned, the number of disciplines involved in this thing we call the space industry and the space economy is broadening every day. So what we're thinking about is how do we create training opportunities for that future workforce that gives them that generalist perspective on what is happening across not only Australia's space industry, but the global space industry, because they need to be connected to that. They need to know what's happening, because that will affect their own conception of what's possible in the future. How do we credential so that we know that we're hiring the right people? And how do we network? How do we make sure that we're getting space professionals together as often as possible to exchange ideas and come up with new solutions to problems we don't even know about yet? And how do we network that space community into the other parts of the economy as well? So there's a big challenge there. That'll be a challenge for our members, but also for government, for universities, for technical colleges, and for schools, because that's a big part of this too. How do we sort of open the experience for school kids who know that, some people in the world get to be astronauts, but need to know about all the other jobs and opportunities we're talking about here too.
Fantastic. There's no one who's more across the research and development, the startup space than you, Tim. I'm going to make this a little bit more specific in terms of skills, because you're an AWS, you've used AWS before, and you're an engineer at heart. What sort of skills do you think our builders should be beefing up on in order to be successful in the space industry?
So I think the fundamental skill set that they already have is an appreciation for complexity, is a passion for how they can put together complex things to solve interesting problems in interesting ways. And I think if you look at some AWS products like Cassandra, you know, there's an amazing kind of mind explosion that happens when you realize that you can handle a cloud formation of different instances. I think that, you know, Ord called it out, first of all, as an attitude. You need to be passionate, you need to be curious, and bring that every day to what you're doing. I think secondly, there are a lot of soft skills we need. We need people to have a mindset of empathy so that they get great requirements from customers, from partners, or even from the people that they need to deliver to with these complex space systems. And in some cases, that means the person who might be doing the business user experience, they need to have a really rich interaction with somebody who may be doing the data schema, because there's information that gets transformed through those soft skills. And then I believe that we need people to also have a real sense of what is the art of the possible. Because in many cases, space unlocks possibilities that we hadn't thought of before. Again, something that, you know, the first time you encounter cloud computing, or the ability to do something like Lambda or serverless computing or a message passing system, you suddenly realize, oh my God, I could do this in a completely new way. Space is very much about how might we do things in a completely new way. And it is extremely integrative. So that curiosity where you go, okay, I'm going to allow myself to follow down that rabbit hole to see how all this might plug together. Yeah. And not only do that from a technological point of view, do it from a social point of view, economic point of view, all those different things that, you know, that software mindset triggers. We want you to bring that to the space sector.
That's fabulous, Tim. I'm taking your word integrative, because I had a lot of different things there. One is customer obsession, empathy, and these are some of Amazon's leadership principles, you know, learn and be curious. So I'm really thrilled to hear that it's not just skills in cloud software engineering, but it's all the kind of things that our Amazon Web Services builders have in spades. This is going to come in handy, since the future of space is clearly data-driven. Thank you, Ord, James, and Tim. You've helped us learn today that space as an industry offers a triple bottom line: return on investment, innovation, and inspiration. And thank you for tuning in to listen. Whether you're a technologist or a business leader, we hope you enjoyed our session. If you'd like to learn more about AWS for aerospace and satellite solutions, please reach out to me. And if you enjoyed this talk on cloud-powered innovation in space, please don't forget to leave some feedback.